Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I started the year off vowing to finally read more manga, particularly because there are so many series out there that may never get anime adaptations. This one may be the last manga review for a while, but overall I'd call the year a success. I stuck to short series, with Behind the Scenes being the longest at 6 volumes. I would like to delve into some longer ones, but I guess we'll see how that plays out next year. For now, Zodiac P.I. is the story of Lily Hoshizawa, and she's far from being an ordinary schoolgirl. Lily is a fortune teller, running an actual shop out of her home, though she'll tell her friends' fortunes for free at school. But it's not all lighthearted fun. Whenever something more serious is going on in town, Lily takes on the alias Spica, named for the brightest star in the Virgo constellation, and uses her fortune-telling to solve crime. Both her passion for fortune-telling and her crime-solving alter ego are things Lily inherited from her mother. She took up the mantle when her mother disappeared, and Mrs. Hoshizawa left her one other thing. One of the highlights of this story is Lily's star ring, which allows her to summon the astral spirit of each star sign. Basically, she'll find out the suspect or victim's birth date, and the corresponding spirit will read out their horoscope, which is usually super on the nose about whatever crime or tragedies happened and doesn't really tell us anything new, and then also share an image or two designed to reveal the truth. That half of the equation was always far more interesting, as it served as an actual clue to the mystery. It's a fun, mystical sort of idea for a story. I've always had a fascination with this sort of thing. Not to the point where I look up my horoscope and plan out my day in accordance to it or anything, but it's an interesting thought that when you came into the world can say something about who you are as a person. From a numbers and odds perspective, it almost does start to seem a little mystical. I'm a Libra, and I've always felt it was a surprisingly good fit, looking at how many stereotypical Libra traits I do relate with. But if I'd been born just a week later, I would have been a Scorpio. It was this same sort of fascination that originally drew me to Fruits Basket, because my zodiac animal traits also describe me pretty well. I know that can't be true for everyone, and like I said, I'm not a hardcore believer, but there have always been enough connections for me personally to generate an interest, so I tend to be drawn in by stories like this one. And right away I took a shine to Lily as a protagonist. She's an Aries, and has got the brash sort of confidence and stubbornness believed to be typical of her star sign. But it was never expressed in a way that got on my nerves. Mostly it comes across that she's just really passionate about her work, which is an endearing trait rather than an annoying one. It could have easily been played up in a different way, making her quick to start arguments or something. But though Lily has plenty of confidence in herself, she's not easily jealous or desperate to prove that she's better than everyone else or anything. I do have to praise Natsume Ando's character crafting, because even Lily's negative traits, namely that she's easily swayed by flattery and can be a little slow to pick up on things, come across as being sort of endearing. That last point, how she can be a little slow or oblivious, really comes into play with the introduction of this series' other main protagonist. The story begins with her old childhood friend Hiromi Oikawa moving back to town, except he's being a lot colder to her now, for some reason she can't discern. Hiromi is very intelligent and observant. He's grown into this master junior detective during their time apart. He has a very logical, scientific approach to things and doesn't believe in fortune-telling, but he has come to really admire Spica and the work she's been doing. A girl in their class ends up murdered on his very first day, and they both do their part, working their separate angles, to solve the mystery and reveal her killer. But Hiromi is quite the detective, and Lily doesn't exactly excel at keeping secrets, so it's not long before he uncovers Spica's true identity. During the first case, they came across like rivals, but after this, they really morph into partners. Which was a plus for me, because I've never been a huge fan of that whole enemies or rivals to lovers dynamic. And that's the big secret, of course. I don't know if you've noticed through the images in this video, but right away when I started reading it, I got hit with a sort of nostalgia. It's very stereotypical shoujo. Big eyes, more outfits for each of the characters than there are days in the story. It was no shock that a romance was going to play a big part in the story, and Hiromi might come across as cold and arrogant at first, but it doesn't take long to realize he's just not great at expressing his feelings, and he's been in love with Lily since they were kids. Their romance was another high point for me, an element that I tend to be kind of harsh on, but no. Zodiac P.I. doesn't have a huge cast of complex characters, but Lily and Hiro were explored well, and I really enjoyed seeing them come together, and also that their partnership is really equal. Things tend to go downhill fast, and Lily's the type to rush into things, but she also ends up saving Hiromi from danger just as often as he saves her. But there were some things about Zodiac P.I. that gave me pause. The mystery element is just okay, to be honest. Some things were definitely given more thought than others. The crimes themselves are usually pretty complicated, but then the conclusions end up being really simple. Oversimplified, almost, with no real talk of lasting consequences, despite how quick so many of the suspects are to pull a knife or a gun on our heroes. Or poison them. Or set a whole damn mansion on fire intending that they burn to death together. I do like high stakes, and this series delivers on that front, but it's also the type of story that tries to redeem all its villains, with the exception of maybe 2 who were just in it for greed. And normally, I'm all about sympathetic villains. It just got to be a bit much, seeing it over and over again. Almost all the culprits did what they did out of love, had good intentions, etc. Lily is very much a romantic, and quicker to forgive than I'd be, so very little is said on what happens to these people after their case. What bothered me more, though, were some of the little details. I always read all the little author's note panels, and Lily's birthday is given as April 16th in one, and then as April 1st, like a chapter later, but at least those are both under the right star sign. In the next volume, she makes this grand entrance where she introduces herself as a Taurus. And in any other series, wrong birth dates would be like the tiniest of details, but it matters here, in a story all about astrology. I don't doubt that Natsumi Ando had a passion for this story, but those sorts of mistakes just feel a little sloppy. It makes me less likely to forgive some of the other things. Like the moments where it felt like she was making it up as she went along, which is something I encounter in a lot of stories written the way manga is, one chapter at a time, but I expect a bit more when the whole story is only 4 volumes long, and most of the characters are only relevant for a chapter or 2. It's not like she realized she was about to contradict something in volume 10 or 15 that she'd established in volume 2 and had to hastily cover her tracks or something. But I don't want this review to get too bogged down by the places I felt it fell short, because I did enjoy this one overall. There's a lot of gray area in any sort of rating system of mine, but I do have 4 main categories. It was bad, don't bother. It was okay, but skippable unless you're really hurting for something to read or watch. It was good, but not great. Feel free to add it to the someday list. And it was amazing and should jump to the top of your to-watch list. Zodiac P.I. falls into the 3rd category, and like all series that are just good, I'm invested enough that I can't help wishing it had been great. I really wish it had been a little longer. The whole thing felt a bit rushed, particularly with the oversimplified endings to most of the cases. Lily and Hiromi's relationship feels like it was done justice, but just about everything else was just a little lacking. I think it would have been cool if the main villain at the end had been introduced earlier, been a more persistent threat. I think we really could have used some more time and explanation on the origins of Lily's star ring. Fortune-telling is a very intangible art. It really runs on faith, and there's always going to be that thought in the back of your mind that it's just some gimmick or intuitive guesswork. Lily's ring is firmly in the realm of actual magic, and I would have liked to hear more about it. But this was a fun read overall, and I suggest looking into it if you're into this sort of thing. I've actually got another series by this same author on my shelf, and I'm interested to see what she can do with a longer story. If nothing else, I trust her character writing, and that's one of the biggest things for me. I wouldn't say Zodiac P.I. deserves to jump your current lineup, but definitely think about adding it to the list. Thank you for watching.